Hello and welcome to a video covering all the new ancient magic spells with a surprising amount of uses, some perhaps unexpected. Whenever you're ready, grab your cup of tea, sit back, relax and enjoy. The first spell I'd like to cover is a spell many people I've seen brush off as something that is completely and utterly useless. However, it is not useless, in fact it's far from it. This spell allows you to gain 10% of an armor's value as flat damage reduction and 33% of your defense level as flat damage reduction as well. Now I don't know how the maths on this work because for whatever reason I'm getting more damage reduction than what I should be getting from this. According to the formula, I should be getting, without overloads, 166.64 damage reduction when wearing full Ganodermic every single hit at Ripper Demons. When testing this with their special Death Animation attack, which has constant hits by the way, I was getting 302 damage reduction. The final hit you see the Ripper Demon drop on me is the 90 damage hit, and that is the hit I take when I have full Ganodermic equipped. I'm equipping Ganodermic as I'm getting hits, and you can see the damage going lower and lower. If we take a look at 3 pieces of Ganodermic armor, being the legs, body and helmet, I'm receiving a damage reduction of 234 damage per hit right here. That's a decrease in damage of about 60%. And this spell updates live by the way, which is why you can see the damage values changing as soon as I start switching my armor pieces. Now that 60% doesn't mean it's 60% damage reduction everywhere. It simply means it's 60% from these hits as they are low hits. If the hit was 10,000, the decrease in damage would still be 234, but the percentage would be much and much lower, which means this spell isn't very effective for bosses that don't hit very often and hit very high. And remember, this is Ganodermic armor we're talking about, level 70 tank armor. With just the boots and gloves, you can get 97 damage reduction per hit with this spell. That is very, very good. You can see the amount of damage reduction on your buff bar in numbers, but be wary, this updates very slowly and it doesn't update in real time, even though you lose the damage reduction instantly as soon as you switch to DPS armor. But when you switch back, you gain it again. Okay, so what does this do? Is it any good? Well, I went to hell with this setup: Ganodermic, Noxious Staff, Unprepared, bad AFK bar, no Ripper Demon familiar, in fact no familiar whatsoever, and I was able to AFK Hellware using this spell. That is how good this spell is in combination with tank armor. And please don't look at my boss timer. I've never actually taken Hellware seriously, and I don't think I've done the boss in like years apart from a boss mask. What about Twin Furies? Well, with Ganodermic you can get as close as AFK King as you'd like, although it's not very effective and it's not a good idea to do. But you can, although you do need to attack different twins. You can tank the blast, you can tank getting clapped around. It's ridiculous. Vindicta, you can also AFK Vindicta, almost. I assume if you're using Acto, you should be able to stand in the fire and completely AFK Vindicta. I don't actually have Primeval Acto myself, or I would have tested this. But it's as close as you can get to AFKing these bosses now, and that is insane. Next spell, called Incite Fear, is actually really interesting for both Slayer and bossing, as it allows you to use Tsunami at 40% or 30% adrenaline if using a Ring of Vigor, which is really, really good because Tsunami gives you extra adrenaline for each critical hit you do in the next 30 seconds. Which means if you combine this with a Channeler's Ring or other crit chance increasing items, this is going to be pretty crazy. Apart from that, the actual spell itself has a Frost Surge that goes off and that deals 10 to 50% ability damage in a 5x5 area around your target, which means it's really good for AoE things and of course Slayer, which I did test out. Another great thing about this spell is that it only uses runes every time Frost Surge activates. That means you won't be using as many runes as the next spell in this video. Now, I tested this spell with a mediocre weird setup bar using Tsunami a little earlier, and I was just trying out things and I was getting over 1600 kills per hour at Abyssal Demons, pretty much AFK, right? So that is extremely close to tryhard chinning these using a ranged dummy in terms of kills per hour. And I sometimes even forgot to activate the aggression and Kudal's favor ability, so that shows how good it can be. But do keep in mind, I am using Greater Chain. I do have an Inquisitor Staff with Corroming 4 on it. Basically what it comes down to, it's a good spell for Slayer, hands down, but results may vary depending on how many upgrades you have, and if you have Greater Chain or not, and all that kind of stuff. But the main thing I wanted to know is it better than a Scythe when doing Slayer? And I don't even have an optimal bar. I'm not using an optimal setup. I'm not using optimal perks or my Inquisitor Staff. Is it better than the Scythe? And the answer to that is, at some tasks, it definitely is. It just is. I'm getting way more kills per hour using that spell at Abyssal Demons and Curdle's Dungeon from what I can see on my Slayer data spreadsheet. I got 360 kills per hour at Venomous Dinosaurs using the spell, just camping it, not doing anything else. That's more kills per hour than the Scythe and than the Aekia's Spear. If you're wondering how many more I'm getting, about 30 to 50 kills per hour more depending on what your melee setup is. It must be noted I'm not using an optimal bar, I'm not using an optimal setup. I could probably increase those kills per hour even more. It just requires more testing. I can see this spell being used at shadow creatures, ganodermic creatures, moss golems perhaps when trying to AFK them, and many more. The next spell is Exsanguinate. Now this one is really expensive to use because it uses runes every single ability. You're losing 3 blood runes, 1 death rune, and 5 fire runes. This ability increases your basic ability damage by 1% every single stack up to a maximum of 12 for 20 seconds. At 12 stacks, you can use the Rack ability, which will then turn into Rack and Ruin, to do a lot more damage with that Rack ability, about 3.5 times as much compared to the basic Rack. And it also extends the duration of Combust, which is the Bleed ability, by 2 more hits if cast within 10 seconds of the Rack and Ruin ability. This sounds like a really powerful spell to use with magic, and you could potentially use Incite Fear as well every 20 seconds by switching spells because that effect lasts 20 seconds, so you don't really need to recast it until it's gone. As long as you keep your Incite Fear stacks, switching between these two spells will probably be pretty crazy DPM. I'm not one to calculate good rotations though, I'll leave that up to the mathematicians at PVME or the wiki or somewhere else. I'm not going to do that. I'm not that kind of guy. If anything is a buff to magic, this definitely is. Final spell is Smoke Cloud. Now this spell can be used with ranged, magic, melee, it doesn't matter, you can use it with all combat styles, given that you have either a Seismic Wand switch or Ingenuity of the Humans to give the spell 100% accuracy, because it can splash. What this spell comes down to is a DPS increase because your hit cap is increased from 12,000 to 13,440. Or if you're using a Grimoire, from 15,000 to 16,800. This means the higher critical hit chances, so items that boost it, the higher DPS increase will be from this spell. It's that simple, because you will have more critical hits, and those critical hits will be higher than before. This spell is something you would use in combination with a vulnerability bomb for even more damage. So you're not the biggest fan of using this, but it's a DPS increase, so I probably will be using it, although I don't like doing even more every so often at a boss. Keep an eye on more stuff, but that's a personal thing. Overall, these spells are interesting. I definitely really like some of them, and magic got a buff, but so did ranged and melee. I don't necessarily like that some of the spells use soul runes. They could have easily picked a different rune because soul runes are really hard to get by. You have a few shops, you have the soul altar, that's pretty much it. And you can get way more blood or chaos or nature runes per hour than soul runes. But, you know, it is what it is. They might change that in the future. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it interesting. If you did, leave a like down below and maybe even consider subscribing. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.